Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I will still have Geo on in the background, just some gameplay, just so you have something to watch, because I fear I don't have the editing skills to put in graphics for all of this. But I wanted to talk about something else that I spend a lot of time thinking about, which is psychology, relationship psychology, social work kind of oriented. And I do like to occasionally keep up with reality TV, but recently it's honestly just been kind of exhausting. And I don't even watch the episodes. I watch a select few YouTubers who recap every single one of the episodes, and that's how I consume the content. And I was still exhausted. And it's because the relationship dynamics have started to get so unhealthy, so hard to watch, so painful that I feel like not enough people are talking about it. So today I wanted to go over one specific relationship from a well-known reality TV show that I think captures a good amount of the problematic dynamics that I pick up on and that a lot of commentary channels pick up on, but maybe don't have time to flesh out fully. So I'm gonna go over the relationship between Melanie and Sincere in season 8 of Love Island. So the season that just finished up, brand new. They're just starting to get online and do, interviews about everything, stuff like that. I don't really keep up with that stuff, so if anyone happens to, let me know if there's anything I should look into. And I could definitely make this a series. I have so many other relationships that I want to go over. There's a few from The Ultimatum that just came out. For example, Blake and Haley. There were at least 2 more on that show that I wanted to go over, given that the reunion's out now. So first, I'm going to start with my positionality, because I think that's always important for when you're watching a video to know who it's coming from and why. So I'm in my early 20s. I am queer and non-binary. Politically, I'm very left-leaning, and I'll get into some of that later. Kind of just bleeds into everything you talk about at this point. I have a bachelor's in psychology and poli-sci, and I focused on research within the realm of racial clinical psychology. After graduating, I worked as a counselor at a domestic violence shelter for about a year and a half. I'm moving pretty soon here in the next few weeks to start my master's in social work overseas. So I will no longer be living in America, moving to Europe. So just background on me, who I am, the experience that I have, and then to go over my exposure to reality TV, in particular, Love Island, but also The Ultimatum and YouTube drama as well was something that I wanted to talk about eventually. I have pretty limited exposure. As I said, I don't watch the episodes themselves. I don't have any streaming services because I don't want to pay for them. The main YouTube channels that I do watch for these reviews, and I highly, highly recommend them because I'm pretty picky about the channels that I will watch. It's Queen E on YouTube, Tait's Take, and Bachelor Fantake, and I'll link all of them in the description. I'm very picky and choosy with whose reviews I will watch, and those people in particular have very intelligent insights into the relational dynamics and even just the, personality patterns of different individuals that are on these reality TV shows. I just always find their commentary really fascinating, and it always offers a good perspective that is usually something that I'm also picking up on, or they have a good point and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right, you noticed a pattern that I missed. I always really appreciate that, because you always, when you're watching these shows, you want to scream something into the TV, and I feel like they kind of do that for me, which is good. So I also want to go over that I did not use any kind of AI to make this video. I didn't use AI summaries. I didn't write the script using AI. Everything that I did use will be linked in the description. For the most part, I went back through all of Queen E's episode by episode recaps to find the key points from Melanie and Sincere's relationship, so that I can kind of point to different specific instances of things happening to talk about. And then just to conclude, this is not going to be a perfect video. It's not going to be a perfect summary. There's a good chance that I got some of the information incorrect or not exactly correct. This is kind of just something I decided to do today. So however long it takes, I don't know. I just kind of locked in and did all the research for this video in one day because I couldn't stop thinking about it. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, and if I get something wrong, feel free to let me know. But yeah. So to start, I want to go over who the audience is when you're watching reality television. The audience is mostly women, mostly younger women, even teenagers, and I think that that's something to really keep in mind when we're going through each of these, not only the relationship events, but also when we break down different dynamics afterwards. I want us to keep going back to who's the audience, because I think that's the most important thing here, because that's why it matters. It matters what we're teaching teenagers, young women, even young men, how to act, what things are tolerable behaviors, things like that. This is what teaches them that these are the examples that young people are getting of relationships, and that's why this matters so much. So, Love Island Season 8, we have Melanie and Sincere. They pretty much coupled up from the beginning. They were pretty toxic from the beginning. There were, for example, Melanie had said she tends to self-sabotage in relationships. Sincere, during a challenge, admitted that he had previously been texting other girls while he was in a relationship. And overall, Melanie expresses that she, in the past, hasn't been received well when she communicates, and so she was trying to not communicate, which is not exactly the answer. It just lends itself to a possibility of the communication style being missing something or being able to be improved upon. So, to start out, the overarching theme of this whole relationship is Sincere does things he knows will hurt Melanie, and Melanie takes him back anyway. It happens over and over and over again. And Melanie's even aware of that dynamic, and she still plays into it, and we'll talk more about that later. So originally this starts out at the beginning as kind of a tit for tat game, which is never a good thing in a relationship. Once that's starting, it's like, well, something's got to change, because that's just bad, immediately unhealthy. Melanie, I believe, kisses another guy in the villa named Corbin during a challenge. That hurts Sincere. She, apologizes to Sincere, but says she's still exploring. That's when she discusses self-sabotage and how she doesn't want to mess it up. Then some bombshells enter the villa, one of them being named Soul. Sincere takes a liking to Soul immediately. They kiss. Melanie finds out about the kiss. He tells her about the kiss. I believe there were 2 kisses, and he told her about one of them. And so he tells Melanie, you know, that didn't mean anything. He doesn't want her. He only wants Melanie. So she forgives him and they kiss. So that's all one conversation. So then after that, at some point, I'm not sure how quickly, but at least within the next 12 hours, he goes into like a little room called Soul Ties where it's like private, and he kisses Soul again right after. Again, I believe he kind of gets caught and some of the other girls tell, and then he goes back to Melanie and then apologizes and says he didn't mean to hurt her, and Melanie forgives him because she feels guilty about what she had been doing with Corbin at the beginning. And also she tells one of the other girls she just likes him so much, so she forgives him. So then, what does Sincere do? He goes and kisses Soul again. At this point, he knows how Melanie will feel. He knows that he's gotten away with it twice in the past. And he knows that he'll probably get away with it again. So, at that point, Melanie and Sincere end things. What Melanie said, well, what they're both saying, it's over, but it's kind of not. Like, you can tell there's still something there. But Melanie's recoupled with Corbin, and Sincere is recoupled with Soul. And they were kind of doing their own thing and their own connections. And Sincere wants to grab Melanie and go talk to her, and tells her all about how he misses her, and he just, it hurts seeing her with someone else, after they're both recoupled. Then when he's asked about it in a producer run interview, he says, you know, oh yeah, Melanie started the I miss yous. That's not what we saw. Sincere immediately does Soul dirty the next time he has the chance, and he writes Melanie this long letter, apologizing and saying he's changed and he'll do better, promises to do better, notably. Melanie absolutely eats it up. She already didn't really have a backbone when it came to him from the moment that they had the I miss you conversation, even though he did start it. Then, you know, Soul talks to him and is like, hey, why'd you do that? And he's like, well, don't act like you didn't do anything wrong. And I'm lost at this point, because Soul didn't do anything wrong. Her one job is to form a connection so she can stay in the villa. So he starts trying to make Soul feel guilty for the way that she acted, even though to her and the audience, she didn't really do anything wrong. Then it just cuts back to Melanie and Sincere, back to kissing. Then we have Casa Amor. Keep in mind, Sincere has just made this huge declaration of how he's going to change, he's going to do better, he's so sorry, he promises to do better. He makes a connection with another girl named Amora in the Casa Amor, and then kisses her. Melanie, in the meantime, says she misses Sincere. She knows she's going to get done dirty. That's something to keep in mind, that she explicitly says, I know he's going to let me down. And she forms a bond with a man named Corey, and I think she does kiss Corey as well. Corey one night tells Melanie that she's kind of missing things from what Sincere has told her, like Sincere's leaving things out, he's not being completely honest. She takes this quite well. She does, you know, listen and absorb, but she ultimately chooses not to bring Corey back into the villa, even though in her kind of speech about why she made that decision, she was all about how Corey was a respectful, good, kind man, perfect for her, I believe she even says, but she still doesn't bring him back. Sincere also comes back alone, and he, previous to the decision, talks about how he kind of assumes Melanie will just take him back. He's right. The fact that he's saying that out loud is scary. She lets him have it. at the, return to the villa because he did not hold true to his promise. He said he was going to do better, and he immediately had some kind of intimate relationship with another woman in Casa. So she yells at him, lets him have it, and then she takes him back. Sincere's feeding her, Amora means nothing to me, like, it was always you, blah, blah, blah. And one of the other girls in the villa kind of sits Melanie down and says, he was a lot closer with Amora than he's letting on. So then Sincere just keeps apologizing. He talks about how he wants to grow and be a better man. Tells all of that to Melanie, and then goes back to his little guy friends, and he goes, and this is a quote, "I don't lie, I just don't tell the whole truth." So then Amora gets voted to come back into the villa by the audience, and Sincere tells her that, he told Melanie everything. She knows everything that happened between them. He just didn't want it to be awkward. He's trying to, play like the stand-up guy role. And keep in mind, Melanie at this point does not know everything. She knows that Sincere and Amora kissed because it was shown to her on a video clip while she was in Casa, and that they had some kind of connection beyond that, and nothing more. He has not given her any details. Notably, Melanie says, the prize isn't being chosen, it's being respected. And she says, this is something that she says multiple times throughout the season, but it's very hollow when she says it. It doesn't really amount to anything. You'd think that would change her behavior, but it's almost like she has this dissonance between the words that she's saying and the way that she's responding to Sincere. And I'll kind of talk more about that later and like why that tends to happen in people who are being abused. Then Sincere has another conversation between Sincere and his guys is shown, and he says, "I told half-truths to Melanie and to Amora to keep myself out of trouble." He says that out loud. So this isn't just like, oh, it happened, it was the heat of the moment. No. He's playing a game. He's choosing his language to reach an outcome. And I think that that's something very important about the situation, and I'll touch on that again later. But him and Melanie are all good again, but then it's movie night. So movie night is when the producers pick clips to show everyone in the villa of people that, everyone might not know about or might not have seen. So Melanie sees all of the kisses between Sincere and Soul that she didn't know about. So there was at least one, if not two, that Sincere never said anything to her about. Sincere says, it was just the heat of the moment, like I couldn't help myself, that kind of tune. Melanie's silent. She doesn't even, yell back. And it's almost worse because like the pain that she's sitting in. She then sees a clip of Sincere in Casa Amor admitting that if he'd had more time with Amora, he probably would have chosen her. So it's just another cut to her, security in this relationship. And when she's reflecting on, his behavior, she says, he only stays with me because he knows that I'll take him back no matter what. Like, he keeps doing these things, and then he keeps coming back to me singing the same tune, and I keep taking him back. And that's scary because she knows what's happening. She can see it, and yet she can't figure out a way to break out of it. So then Melanie and Sincere have a conversation, and Sincere tries to kind of put it back on her of like, well, you had a connection in the villa too, and you treated Corbin poorly when you went back to me. She didn't promise you that she was going to do better after she previously betrayed your trust. Like, when she was with Corbin, there was no trust. And that's really the difference that she, tried to articulate, but when you're in that situation and a person is just pounding on you for things that kind of seem irrelevant to the situation you're in now, it's hard to take a step back and look at the bigger picture of where the discussion is going. And I think that she kind of got sucked into the weeds of well, who did this and who did that, instead of you're changing the topic because you don't want me to be able to explore your actions. Sincere, the next day, talks with Melanie about his behavior with Soul prior to anything that had happened with Amora, and he takes out the therapy speak, which is always kind of funny. And he goes, yeah, I'm just a people pleaser, and that's why I wasn't honest with both of you. And Melanie, to her credit, calls this out and says, that's not what a people pleaser is. Like, you didn't have to go make out with that girl. And by the end of the conversation, he kind of concedes, like, yeah, I guess that's not what a people pleaser is. Like, then he just goes back to singing his same old tune of, I'm so sorry, I'll be better, I'll change, blah, blah, blah. Melanie, after this conversation, wants to draw a line with Sincere and cut it off and not explore that any further. And then she goes and talks with her friends about it, notably Anaya, but also I believe Trinity and Kata were involved. And they, tell her, give him another chance. He likes you so much. Take him back. And what does she do? She takes him back. Within like 24 hours, they're fine. Like nothing happened. Melanie basically forgives him and they're fine for the rest of the show.
So this is Editing 19 Alligators popping in just to clarify that them being fine for the rest of the show is not indicative of how this relationship would go on the outside, because Sincere has a strong motivation to have the relationship go as smoothly as possible as he nears the end of the show, because there's a monetary incentive involved, and he is actively trying to make it appear as though his relationship is the strongest so that he can access that money. That motivation doesn't exist on the outside. The motivation that exists on the outside is power, and so when I go into talking about the cycle of abuse later, just because we only saw it go through a few times on the show in front of our eyes, that doesn't mean they'll be fine forever, happily ever after. That's not what that means. That means that Sincere has an active interest in keeping things mellow and calm because he wants the relationship to appear strong. I guess I'll leave it there.
They don't win, luckily, but just the fact that this was televised, and again, I'll talk more about this later, but the fact that Sincere as a person has a vested interest in this show and the airing of this show, despite the fact that he displayed abusive tendencies. And that's not to say that he's an abuser or something like that, but the tactics that he was employing were abusive. So now let's go back and let's kind of pick this apart. The idea of not being able to resist temptation is an incredibly harmful message, and here's where I take us back to the audience. These are young women that are watching this show. We should not be teaching young women to excuse quote-unquote men just being caught in the moment. Every single person has complete control over their own actions. They know exactly what the effects of their actions will probably be while they are doing the action. And being in the heat of the moment or not being able to resist temptation, honestly, it perpetrates rape culture because it takes responsibility off of men and saying, what could you do? And it's not what we need to be teaching a young audience, women and men, honestly. You don't want men thinking that they can get away with things just because, it's just the heat of the moment. That's horrible. That is rape culture. The next thing I want to go over are all of the grand, reassurances that were sprinkled in by Sincere, not just to Melanie, but to Sol and to Amora throughout. He tells Melanie multiple times, "It didn't mean anything, I only want you. She didn't mean anything to me." And I don't think that this is talked about enough, but this is manipulative. Like, this is manipulation. He is forming language to get an outcome that he wants by choosing words that will make her feel a certain way because that's the outcome that he intends. He knows that's not true because you know what he does? He goes right back to Sol after saying that to her. And he says the same thing about Amora too. So he knows in the moment what he's saying is not true because he had to still have feelings for Sol unless he kissed Sol, suddenly lost all feelings for Sol, and then suddenly regained all feelings for Sol enough to disregard Melanie's, feelings. So that was not true when he said that. "It didn't mean anything, I only want you" was a lie. And he said that because he knew that it would get Melanie to couple up with him. That is a tactic of abuse. He is using his words to get another person to do what he wants, regardless of whether or not they are true. In fact, they are not true. He knows that. He's aware they're not true. That's not normal. I think that that's a thing that's on a lot of reality TV. And it's one of those things where the audience thinks that's infuriating. But if you are in a relationship and a partner is doing that to you, that is horrible. I don't want to say you need to get out because I can't say every situation, but that is horrible. That is not healthy. That is disrespectful. That is indicative that they see you as less than human because they are moving you around like a pawn to get what they want. So the next thing with the, grand reassurances, the compliments, is the compliments. So he uses compliments the same way that he uses those apologies, those promises, those reassurances to get what he wants. And notably, he says the same thing to all of the women that he takes interest in. He says the same things to Sol, to Melanie, to Amora, and he says them when he wants something from them. He says it to Sol when she's feeling, a little bit insecure about his relationship with Melanie, but he wants to keep things open with Sol. He wants to keep that door open, so he tells her, "I think you are so resilient. I think you are a wonderful person. I'm so glad that I met you," on and on. Then, when he goes back to Melanie, and Melanie's kind of on the path to forgiving him for whatever he did with Sol, even though he didn't even tell her the whole story. He's, "Oh, you're such a wonderful woman. Like, I'm so glad I met." It's the same stuff. And then with Amora, he goes, at the end of Casa Amor, he says, "You're a great woman. Like, I'm so glad I met you. If I had had more time with you, it probably would have been you." This is not normal. You should not be feeling, well, if we're taking his words at face value, you should not be feeling like women are only powerful in themselves, good humans in themselves, when they're doing something you want. Furthermore, you should not feel that way about multiple women at the same time if you truly mean the words that you're saying, in a romantic context. So he's using words to shape these women into the things that he wants them to do, the things that he wants them to be, He wants to have options, so he tells Sol how wonderful he thinks she is, but he doesn't want Melanie to leave, and he wants Melanie to be the person that, stands by and waits for him to come back like a puppy dog. So he says, I'm so grateful to you, you're an amazing woman, blah, 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 so that she feels validated in taking him back. It's all tactics to get what he wants out of these women. It's like a chess game, and these are his pieces, That's icky, and that's not something we want to teach people is okay. I think we need to start dissecting the language people use to a higher degree. Of course, he does all the apologies, the claims to have changed. He wants to be a better man, blah, blah, blah. He's so sorry. He does that probably 4 or 5 times throughout the whole show. Doesn't seem like anything's changed. This is a point that Queen E made in her video during this episode. The way that he speaks to Sol at the end of her time in the villa is very telling, because he completely switches up from being, all apologetic, and he goes, well, don't act like you didn't do anything. What did she do? She did her exact job as a bombshell in the villa. She was very transparent, she was open, but she also handled herself with self-respect. And he basically played with her, went back and forth between her and Melanie, and then discarded her. And not only did he discard her, because that's one thing, he can just decide that he wants to focus on Melanie, but he flipped it on her in her face and said, you're at fault for how you feel, too. So don't just blame me. That is incredibly telling about Sincere as a person. And I think that it's really important to pay attention to how your partner treats other people, because if you see him doing that to another person, making those kinds of twists and leaps in logic, what's to say that they're not going to do that to you? This is not an us versus them. This is a pattern of behavior. You're not going to be an exception. And I don't know that Melanie necessarily saw that conversation or was aware of it, but I think as an audience, you can get a lot from that conversation. So I think a big takeaway from that is pay attention to how your partner speaks about and to other people, because you will be no different. And that goes for the positive too. If you see someone who, has lots of long-term friends, has a really productive way of communicating issues with friends and family, is really good at conflict resolution, that can be a really good sign for someone who might be a good partner as well. The next thing I want to talk about is the feedback that Melanie and Sincere are both receiving from the people around them, the bystanders, the people looking in on this relationship. Because I think that had a huge role in the course that this relationship took. And I think that if we had more, I don't know if educated or informed is the right word, because I don't know what their motivations were for giving this advice, but I think that if Melanie had been given different advice in particular, the course of this relationship would have been significantly different. And this goes into a major theme that I'll get into later, but each time that you go back to a partner or you forgive a partner for something that they've done that was incredibly hurtful to you, it chips away at you. And what it's chipping away at is your self-worth. And so when Melanie's going to, the girls to say, I'm so frustrated with the way that he's acted, I feel so betrayed, I feel so hurt, I don't think he deserves me. The way that her quote unquote friends respond is vital to what she does next. And that's not to say that should be the case. That's to say that Sincere has been chipping and chipping and chipping at her self-worth. And so now she is here seeking validation from other people because she's at a place where she doesn't have it within herself. So when Anaya, even from the beginning, gives her advice like, no, girl, like he loves you, he likes you so much, like he thinks the world of you, like you should forgive him, blah, blah, blah. Up until even after movie night, after she's seen everything that he has done when she's not looking, Anaya, and even then since Trinity and Kata get in on this, they go, no, take him back, girl, like he's gonna change, blah blah blah. Really just hyping Sincere up, very team Sincere, like he cares about you, blah blah blah. I think that this message significantly changed the course of that relationship because had they validated her feelings and said, that was really hurtful that he did that, you don't deserve that, you're right. Validated her perception of things, of, you're right to feel hurt, anyone would. How do you think you want to go about this? Or like, what options do you think you had? And let her work things out on her own while validating her feelings rather than trying to impose things onto her that she should or shouldn't do. She would have probably come to the conclusion on her own that she should not be with a man that acts like Sincere and behaves in the patterns that Sincere does. And that could have saved her a world of trouble. So that's to say that bystanders matter. And I'll again touch on that later when I go over the major overarching themes that I want the audience to leave with. But then we want to go to the feedback that Sincere is receiving from other cast members. They're hearing him, he's saying quotes, I'm lying, or I'm not lying, I'm telling half-truths. I'm telling half-truths to Melanie and Amora just because I want to keep myself out of trouble. They're hearing that language and they go, haha, yeah, bud, like, sounds great. That should not happen. Like, I understand the discomfort in calling out bad behavior in a setting where it's in your best interest to keep as many friends as possible. Like, to a certain degree, they're playing the game, and I understand that. But this is why the behavior is normalized, because Sincere feels comfortable enough to explicitly disclose the games that he's playing and the way that he is maneuvering these women around like pawns to other people out loud. Not only to other people, in front of cameras. He knows that this is going to be public, and he has that kind of audacity. That's scary. Because at this point, it's no longer secretive. He is playing games with these women, treating them as objects in plain sight for everyone to see in the moment. This pattern of behavior is so dangerous and so harmful. The boys don't really say anything in the moment. However, after movie night, they have a little bit of smoke for him. Corbin in particular goes like, I didn't know he was doing all that, says, like, I thought you were a better man than that, like, blah, blah, blah. It's quickly resolved. He, just does his usual, yeah, you're right, like, I'm gonna try and do better, like, bro this, bro that. No real repercussions come out of that. With Anaya, Anaya's another cast member who is close platonic friends with Sincere. She has a bit of flack for him as well, but, they talk, no real repercussions. Anaya then goes back to Melanie feeding the same lines of, oh, he's gonna change, you should forgive him, blah, blah, blah. So the next thing I want to talk about is the themes of what this show is perpetuating that is so scary. And again, this is just one relationship. I could talk about Zach and Kata in place of this. I could talk about Kenzie in place of this. I could talk about Casey and Anaya in place of this. This is just a relationship that had its full course in front of the camera, it seems, and it was very explicit because Sincere did not attempt to hide the things that he was doing. The first thing I want to talk about again is the perpetuation of rape culture. Being in the heat of the moment, being unable to help yourself, that should not be an excuse for anything. You are always in control of your own actions, and you are always responsible for the repercussions of your own actions. The effects that they've had on yourself and on other people, that's on you. There's no, it doesn't matter what the context was. You did that. You chose to do that. You knew what you were doing. It stops there. Um, the idea that he's trying to pass off blame of like, oh, I couldn't help it. No, you could help it. Factually, you could help it. And it's teaching, boys and men to use that for possibly even more dangerous behaviors. And it's teaching women to accept that. And of course, when I talk about men and women here, I don't want this to seem that I think that women can't be aggressors of abusive behavior and men can't be victims of abusive behavior. And obviously, there is a spectrum of genders and a in between. And I'm speaking generally in the context of this show and in the context of the majority of perpetration of these issues. The next thing I want to talk about is the cycle of abuse. And I want to preface this by saying that the cycle of abuse is not a perfect model. It is not a linear model. It's not even a circle. You can go back and forth and crisscross between the different, stages per se. But this is something that is really prevalent in Melanie and Sincere's dynamic. So we can start out at the beginning saying this is tensions building. Melanie does something that Sincere finds her sincere, then Sincere does something even worse that hurts Melanie, and then there is a big blow up, right? Where, Sincere does Melanie super dirty, going and kissing Soul again after just telling her, Soul means nothing to me, I only want you, it's all about you. That's stage 2, is the incident. It's some kind of lashing out, some kind of, it's the escalation in the tit for tat. Then what comes next is the groveling, which that would be stage 3, reconciliation. So he's, I'm so sorry, I'll change, I'll get better, I only want you, you're such an amazing woman. It meant nothing to me, it didn't mean anything, it was nothing. Trying to shape her perception of what just happened. Trying to make her feel a type of way about what he's just done. Then, she ultimately takes him back. Everything's fine. Then Casa Amor happens. She sees the clip of him kissing Amora. She doesn't know what's happened beyond that. Then they all get back to the villa. She is disappointed in him from what she knows. She, lets him have it. Then movie night. And movie night's tricky because it wasn't necessarily him inciting the incident, but his old behaviors that he had no control of when they were played back to her incited the incident. But it was still something that he did. So we're right back to another incident, another stage 2. And then he goes and grovels and he says he's going to change and he's going to do better. And then what does Melanie do in the end? She takes him back. Everything is calm again. So I just took you through 2 whole circles of this happening. And this is very textbook, but it's so on the nose that it's scary because this is what's being normalized. This is a pattern that is going out to young women and men through their TV without being dissected or challenged in any way. That is scary. This is not what a relationship should be like. This should not happen in a healthy relationship. I don't know what else to say other than that is terrifying. And that's why I'm making this. Because every time that person gets to stage 4 and they take this person back and forgive them for the harm that they've caused with no real change ever being displayed, it chips away at their self-esteem. It chips away at their self-worth, their sense of who they are as a human being, until they are nothing but the forgiver of an abuser. That is scary. Next thing I want to talk about is there's all of this talk about, my head says this and my heart says this. And that is Melanie's struggle for a lot of this season, because she is so aware of the dynamic, and yet she can't get out of it. She still keeps playing back into it over and over again. And this one is tricky because, of course, she has agency. She is a grown woman. She can do what she wants with herself. And I'm not trying to take away her agency when I say this, but Sincere has chipped away at her self-worth to a point where she is not only seeking that out from Sincere through, compliments and reassurance and things like that, but she is losing faith that Sincere will provide that to her, so then seeking it out from her friends and the other women in the villa. And that's because she's lost that self-worth. So she's seeking other people to tell her not only what to do, but that she is, a worthy individual and that she's right to feel the way that she does. And by receiving perhaps well-intentioned but misguided validation, I guess, or misguided advice on what to do in the situation, it sets her up to fall further into that downward spiral that we just talked about. It's, reassurance between stages 3 and 4 that, convince her to keep going around and around and around. And again, it's just chipping away at her, and so she'll seek more external validation, and she'll keep getting hurt if they keep giving her that advice. So the head versus heart debate, I think, is centered around an individual's self-worth, because if their head is picking up on a pattern and saying, I know that this person is going to do this hurtful thing to me again because they've done it to me in the past, this is a behavioral pattern, I don't deserve that, even if I feel attached to them. That person is not important enough for me to stick around to experience that behavior again because I do not deserve it. If a person's able to say that, that's how you cut this circle. By having the self-worth and self-respect to know that you don't deserve to experience that thing ever again, and you don't deserve to stick around and find out whether it will happen again. Melanie, throughout the course of the season, you see that ability crumple within her. It just absolutely falls apart, and it's heartbreaking to see, because she goes from being the type of woman at the very beginning of the show who, stands on business, doesn't take any BS, to literally saying at the end of movie night, he always comes back to me because he knows I'll keep taking him back. But still, she's there. So if you're a bystander of this kind of relationship where you can't tell someone, this is or isn't abusive, it's writing the line, there's manipulative language being used, there's abusive tactics being used, the way that you respond matters a whole lot. And I think that that's something that the girls left a lot to be desired in that regard. Because if they had not even given her advice, but just said, it makes perfect sense that you feel like that. I think anyone would probably feel like that in your situation. What do you think you want to do about it? All they would have done is validate her feelings and ask her to consider what options she has going forward. That's not any kind of different advice. That's not any kind of profound wisdom. That's just echoing back the way that she feels and letting her have a space to talk through what she wants to do about it. Because then she can say it out loud logically and see if it makes sense or not. And all you have to do is validate back to her, rephrase back to her, summarize what he's done and how that makes her feel. You're not adding anything to that, really. And so they didn't have to go and do all that, but because they did, I don't want to say because they did, but she was seeking out some validation that she was justified in being hurt. And they basically told her, well, yeah, but you should give him another chance. Why are you inserting yourself in that way? That you're forming a judgment about what someone else is doing, and it wasn't helpful to Melanie. I won't say for sure that it changed the course of the relationship, but it definitely didn't lend itself to keeping Melanie's self-worth intact. That's what I'll say. So that's what I wanted to talk about last, is bystanders when you're looking at these relationships from the outside. Especially when one party's coming to you saying, oh, like, I don't know what to do, blah, 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 kind of venting to you. The way that you respond matters so much because their self-worth is chipped away right now. Their self-worth is damaged, and they are looking for someone to pump that back up from the outside. And ideally, you want that worth to come from the inside. You want to be able to say, I felt that way, and because I felt that way, I don't deserve to be in this situation. This isn't right for me. Once you start to need another person to tell you how you should or shouldn't feel, that's dangerous, because if you get advice that leads you down the wrong path and you listen because of all the shoulds, that can be really damaging and it can lead you further down the spiral. So that's kind of all I wanted to talk about in terms of themes. You can kind of see, I'm sure this is very long-winded, but you can kind of see how we go from just offhand comments that play into rape culture into two full circles on camera of the cycle of abuse, to the way that affects someone's self-worth and how a person's self-worth can be further affected by bystanders who are looking at that relationship from the outside in. I want to tie this all in at the end to our audience. We have just gone over all of these themes that are clearly shown in this show, and they are not challenged on the show. Maybe if you're getting some review, I know a lot of the reviews that I watch do challenge these, but most people are just watching the show. And if you think of the human brain like a computer, you are feeding this computer data points of what a normal relationship is. Especially in young adult and teenager brains that are still forming neural connections and still growing. You are feeding these baby computers who are still growing data points on what normal relationships look like. But it's feeding these young people ideas of what relationships should be like that are entirely untrue and are in fact scary and unhealthy. Like, this is why people think it's okay to be spoken to the way Melanie is treated and spoken to by Sincere. And it's not a far leap from what Sincere did to cheating, to verbal abuse, to physical abuse, to being killed. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that because I've watched it. I've heard dozens of stories in my professional life. I know the little things that happen because I hear about them, and the little things lead to the bigger things, because once you go down far enough on that spiral, the little things just seem like the big things, and it's like, what's the difference? Because your self-worth is already so small that you don't even know who you are outside of forgiving this one person and trying to make them happy. So to end discussing the actual show, the actual relationship that I went over, I want to talk about why this is being publicized. Who stands to gain from publicizing this? And it all leads back to money, right? Reality TV has a vested interest in conflict and shock value that creates virality, which creates revenue. And that's why we keep seeing these. And that's why we keep feeling like the relationships are more and more amped up every year. I know that's something that I've noticed, is that 5 years ago, the reality TV drama was not this crazy. I'm sorry it wasn't, but they're looking for something that's always bigger and better, and so they find people who will deliver that by any means necessary. It's a lack of morality that is honestly shocking. Actually, no, it's not shocking, because I think that as a premise, capitalism lacks morality, and that's where my political views come into this, of that at the end of the day, they are doing this because they like money. The message that they are giving to a young audience does not matter to them, because they are not receiving backlash for it. It is not affecting their monetary gains. So they will keep doing this until they have any kind of accountability. And not only do, the reality TV networks, the streaming services like Netflix, not only are they profiting from this, but abusers and bystanders within the show are profiting from this. I didn't know who Sincere was before this show. Certainly know who he is now. Sincere is getting brand deals. He's getting on podcasts. That's all money. That's all money. That's all exposure. He is a public figure now. Does he deserve to be a public figure? Is he who we want to be pedestaling as a society? Obviously not. But because his personality and his behavioral patterns were good for a TV show to make money off of, he is now a public figure, a pedestaled individual in our society. And the same can be said about Casey, the same can be said about Kenzie, the same can be said about Zach. I also want to go further and say that the benefits reaped from poor behavior publicly online are present in, the YouTube scene as well. You can take James Charles, you can take Gabby Hanna, you can take Colleen Ballinger. All of those are people who have displayed horrendous behaviors, and it's recently become public. And yeah, it's, dampered out their career. They don't really have a booming YouTube channel anymore, we'll say. They are still living perfectly comfortable lives. In terms of their basic needs, this has not affected them at all. They receive lots of popularity. They go on podcasts whenever they want because everyone wants to hear from them. All of that is money. So I want to end this, I guess, just by saying that I am scared for the direction that our media is going. In this, I specifically focused on one relationship, but again, there are many more that I could add to this. I think that this downward spiral that eats away at your personhood as a victim of abusive tactics, it goes unnoticed and unexamined, especially in shows like these, and you can see it just so clearly in Melanie and Sincere, and it's heartbreaking. I feel for Melanie because she should not think that this behavior is acceptable, and it's not her fault that she does. she has complete control over the decisions that she makes, but she has been significantly influenced by the people around her to think that that behavior is okay, which has then affected her decision making. So this is not to say that Melanie needs to just shape up. This is to say that she has been worn down by everyone around her because they're all telling her that this is normal and it's not normal. It's scary. It's so scary. And this is also not to say that Melanie is perfect. As she says in the beginning, she has self-sabotage tendencies. She maybe doesn't have the best style of communicating, but she does not deserve this. This is disgusting. And even though this is not overt abuse, this is what turns into abuse a few months down the line. And I think I'll leave it at that. I know this is not my usual video. I know I'm normally a lot sillier. This is, one of my other topics, and I thought it was important to share. So thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it, and please ask any questions or leave any comments or things you would add. I'm sure I didn't get to everything. I'm sure I made mistakes. Please let me know. But I hope that was a rant that made sense. I'm not usually a video essay kind of guy. This is kind of an on the whim thing. So yeah, if you do want to see me go over other relationship dynamics in other shows, I'd also be interested to do that. Just let me know. But yeah, stay safe, and I'll see you whenever I post another video in the next several months, probably. Bye, guys.